We're going to be looking at Jesus' trial. Last week we looked at Peter denying Jesus, and this morning we're going to look at Jesus' trial. We've seen a lot of big trials over the years. Over the past 25 years, we've seen some really big ones like O.J. Simpson and Martha Stewart, Timothy McVeigh. Most recently, close to home, was Casey Anthony. Two of these went to prison, and the other two, most of us would probably say they should have went to prison. And but they were found innocent and released. And as much news coverage of these trials, and as much as we've talked about them and heard about them, and even still today, this day, O.J. Simpson's trial was like 23, 24 years ago, somewhere in there, 25. And we're still talking about it today. But there's been a trial that's been talked about a whole lot longer. And it's really even more famous trial, I guess you could say. We've been talking about it for almost 2,000 years. The trial we'll look at today, two different judges found the defendant not guilty. And he was still sentenced to the most horrible death known to man. The person on trial is Jesus, and we may say he was falsely accused, and really he was. But the trial had to happen. This trial had to happen. The story had to happen. The sentencing had to happen. And the thing is, Jesus, the one on trial, knew all this was going to happen, even the outcome of it, before he was even born and came to this earth as a human. He knew all this was going to happen before it happened. As a matter of fact, Jesus and God the Father planned all this out. Yes, Jesus planned out his trial, his sentencing, and even the execution. Jesus even predicts his death multiple times to the disciples. He was trying to prepare them, but they never did understand. I mean, that would be like me coming up here this morning and telling you, in a couple of weeks, they're going to come arrest me, and they're going to take me and put me on trial, and we'll be found innocent, and then they're going to execute me. They're going to take me and hang me, or they're going to take me and put me in the electric chair, or give me the lethal injection. Most of you would probably be like, this man's lost his mind. I mean, who stands up and predicts? And, Jesus being who he was, I mean, his own disciples are, Peter even says, Jesus, you're wrong. That's not going to happen to you. And as we seen last week, Jesus tells him, Peter, Satan, get behind me. And I don't know about you, but can you imagine knowing that you would be falsely accused, put on trial, beaten nearly to death, then crucified on a cross? Knowing that was going to happen. Maybe you've seen a vision or somebody told you that was going to happen. But knowing that you were innocent, wouldn't you do anything and everything in your power to prove your innocence? Maybe you would go hide somewhere. You say, well, I'm going to go run out into the woods and stay out there. I'll live off the land and live out of the woods. And Jesus did know all this, but he still followed through with it. He didn't run. He didn't stop. He didn't hide. Even Peter pulls his sword and cuts off the high priest's servant's ear, and Jesus rebukes him for it. We're not here to fight. We're not here to stop this. This is meant to happen. There have been many stories of people who have been found guilty, been put in prison, some for 20, 30 years, some even executed. And then new technology has come out, especially in the last 20 years or so. New technology has come out, and they found that some of these people have been sitting in prison for 20, 30 years, have been even executed, and they were innocent. But this morning, to the best of my knowledge and my research, we're going to talk about Jesus, a trial that he was found innocent by not only Pilate, but Herod. And he was still sentenced to death. I don't know that that's ever happened in history since Jesus. Found innocent. Not found guilty and then put in prison and then later found innocent. No, Jesus was found innocent, but it was still sentenced to death. Luke 23, verse 1 says, "Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate." Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, I come to you this morning, Lord, just asking that you'll forgive me of my sins. Father, asking that you will allow your Holy Spirit to speak through me today. Now, Father, that you would open each and every heart. Open our spiritual ears and our spiritual mind that we may truly understand the message that you have for us today. Father, each and every one of us are going through different things in life. We're all dealing with different situations, and Father, I pray that you would speak to us individually and where we're at in life right now. And Father, I pray that you'll allow your Holy Spirit to use me as your instrument to speak through. And I ask these things in your name. Amen. Again, last week we seen Peter's denial. Jesus even predicted that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. After that, Jesus was then beaten. It says that more or less that they took him out, they blindfolded him, and then started punching him in the face. We see that in Luke chapter 22, verses 62 through 65. Then, in the story, Jesus is taken before the Sanhedrin. This is a group of elders of the city. And he is questioned by the elders, by the chief priest and the scribes. They didn't really have the authority to put Jesus to death, so they says, hey, we got to take him a little bit farther. They figure out what the accusations they're going to make, and they says, okay, let's take him to Pilate. And there's 3 parts of this trial that we're going to look at this morning. And the first part is the charge. Verses 1 through 5 says, "Then the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this fellow perverting the nation, and forbidding to pay taxes to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Then Pilate asked him, saying, Are you the king of the Jews? He answered him and said, It is as you say. So Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no fault in this man. But they were the more fierce, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee to this place. Pilate was the Roman ruler. His responsibilities, his position was to keep peace in the city and to collect taxes, to make sure that people were paying their taxes as they were supposed to be. So the people bring Jesus to Pilate. And they charge him, they bring 3 accusations or 3 charges here against Jesus. Number 1, perverting the nation. Number 2, forbidding payment of taxes to Rome. And number 3, claiming to be the Christ. The first charge was a general complaint involving disturbing the peace. They're saying that Jesus was bringing an uproar, causing disturbance in the city. And there was a general uneasiness amongst the people. But Jesus was not the leader of this disturbance. The second charge was a forbidding payment of taxes. And this was a blatant lie, because if you look back in Luke chapter 20, verses 20 through 26, we see that Jesus teaches to pay the taxes. The Pharisees try to catch Jesus in a trap and try to get him to say that you are not supposed to pay your taxes. And he asks one of them, he says, well, whose picture, who is that on the coin that you're holding right there? And they say it's Caesar. And he says, well, pay to Caesar what is Caesar's, and pay to God what is God's. So he didn't tell them not to pay your taxes. He was teaching to pay taxes. The third charge is claiming to be Christ. Now, this charge was true in one sense and not so true in another sense. See, the people had, Jesus had claimed to be Christ, and he was Christ. He was the King of the Jews, but see, the people were trying to make it out as Jesus was a threat to Caesar in his position. That he was threatening to take over Caesar's position as ruler over the world at that time. But Jesus was not doing that. He was not a threat to the Roman government. Pilate asked Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus responds, it is as you say. In other words, he's saying, I am who you say. Or, yes, I am the king of the Jews. Christ's kingdom, though, is spiritual. And it will not interfere with Caesar's jurisdiction. He was not after Caesar's throne. He was not out to dethrone Caesar, to take his place. He was there to bring salvation to the people. He was the King of the Jews. He was the Messiah. What it boils down to here is that the accusers, which were the high priest and the other Jewish officials, they did not have any real charges. They didn't really have anything that they could accuse him of. They had been trying to trap him and get him to say things to go against the Jewish and the Roman government, but they had not been able to do that. So here, they just, we'll make up some things. We'll just bring some accusations against him. These three charges, they felt were a guaranteed conviction because, again, Pilate was in charge of keeping the peace. He was in charge of making sure the taxes were being paid. So what else should we do? Here we're taking him in front of the guy that is supposed to keep peace in the city, and we're accusing this man of being a troublemaker, of telling people not to pay their taxes. So this was for them, they thought it was a guaranteed conviction. Pilate says, I find no fault in him. I've examined what you said. I've listened to your stories here. But there's no evidence. There's no proof of this. I find no fault. And this really stirs the people up. This really gets the crowd going and fires them up. And they start saying, he's stirring the people up. He's causing the disturbances in the city. He's causing the uneasiness. Again, they're accusing Jesus of being a troublemaker. You ever had that person in your life before that they've accused you of things? Whatever reason, they don't like you. Maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a sibling, or maybe a classmate, or maybe a neighbor. That they just find every reason they can to try to call the law on you, try to go to the boss and, he's not doing his job. Maybe it's your sibling, Mom, he's doing this. And you know that you're innocent. You know that you've not done what the accusations are against you. But they just continue to throw these accusations out after you over and over again. No matter how many times the cops show up your door and there's no proof, there's no evidence of the accusations that the neighbors are making. But a couple days, a week goes by, and the cops are knocking on your door again. The neighbors have called the law and made more accusations. In verse 5, the accusers were trying to suggest that Pilate was at risk of being found derelict in his duty. His job was to keep peace in the city. His job was to keep people from causing disturbances. And so more or less the people are like, hey, if you don't bring some kind of justice here, if you don't do something about this guy, we're going to go above your head. We're going to go to the next guy in charge. And we're going to tell them that you're not doing your job by keeping peace. The second point, or the second part of the trial this morning, is the findings. Verses 13 through 17 says, Then Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, said to them, You have brought this man to me as one who misleads the people. And indeed, having examined him in your presence, I have found no fault in this man concerning those things of which you accuse him. No, neither did Herod, for I sent you back to him, and indeed nothing deserving of death has been done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him, for it was necessary for him to release one to them at the feast. Pilate explains that Jesus was brought to him. He was charged with misleading the people. He was charged with trying to start a disturbance. And Pilate then says, I have examined him in your presence. He didn't take him into a private room. He didn't take him into another area that the people could not see what was going on. He examined Jesus right in front of them, right in front of the whole crowd. He listened to the accusations that were given. He listened to the accusers' stories. And then he says, you know what? I find no fault. What you've said, there's no evidence, there's no proof of what you're saying. He then says, I found no fault in this man. This is the second time in these verses that Pilate says, I have found no fault in him. And then in verse 22, we'll see in a few minutes that he says it a third time. A total of 3 times, Pilate says, I have found no fault in this man. In other words, he's saying he is innocent. He's not guilty, he is innocent. He'd even sent Jesus to Herod. He finds out that Jesus was preaching and around Galilee. And he says, hey, let me send him over to Pilate. Let me send him over to Herod. Let Herod take care of this situation. Herod sends him back and says, all these accusations that have been brought against him, I don't see no proof in it. I don't see what they're getting at. So Pilate says, 3 times I find no fault. 3 times he's innocent. And not only have I found him innocent, but Herod has found him innocent. The people, the Jewish officials, are not having this innocent verdict. They're not settling with this. They're not agreeing with this. So Pilate says, okay, you don't like the innocent verdict. I find no fault in this man. You have no proof. You have no evidence to back up your accusations. But guess what? This is what I'm going to do. Since y'all are in such an uproar, obviously you don't like this guy. I'm going to chastise him and then I'll release him. What does the chastising mean? Pilate was hoping that he could take and have Jesus publicly whipped. That's what chastising is. Take him out and publicly whip him in front of the crowd, and then we'll release him. Now, a public whipping would generally be the right punishment for the accusations that were brought against Jesus. If he would have been found guilty. If Jesus would have been found guilty, taking him out in the streets and whipping him would have been the right punishment. But Jesus was found innocent. But yet Pilate, he knows the people didn't like Jesus. He knew that the people wanted Jesus dealt with. He knew that they weren't going to stand for just the innocent the innocent verdict. So he says, we'll publicly whip him. I don't know about you, but if you were ever on trial, charges were being brought against you for, whatever, but the case had been tried, the verdict of innocent had been given. You were facing the death penalty. Whatever you were accused of, the penalty was going to be the death penalty. Not life in prison, not 25 years or 10 years, but death penalty. And the innocent verdict was given. What a huge relief that would be. Could you imagine being on trial for, say, murder or something? Knowing that if you're convicted, if the guilty verdict is given, you're going to the death chair. You're going to the electric chair or the lethal injection, whatever they're using at that time. And you hear the jury say innocent. Man, what a ton of bricks that would be lifted off your shoulders, off your chest. But this is no normal trial. Jesus knew he was innocent. Jesus knew that the accusations that were brought against him were false. He knew he had not done nothing wrong. But he also knew the death penalty is what had to happen. And the thing about it, these Jewish officials, the accusations they were bringing against him, the death penalty that they were seeking, was all part of God's plan. It was all part of the plan that had been made thousands of years ago, really. We would think that with an innocent verdict, in this case, Jesus would just be set free. But the Jewish leaders did not want that. And Pilate was a people pleaser. He was a people pleaser. He wasn't going to just, he's innocent, let him go home. Y'all settle down or I'm going to start having y'all arrested. No, he says, well, let's come to some kind of agreement. He's innocent, so I'm not going to send him to the cross like y'all want. But y'all don't want me to just turn him free, so let's come to some kind of agreement. Let me take him out in the street and beat him. Can you imagine going back to you being on trial again? You hear that innocent verdict. And the prosecutor stands up and says, it doesn't matter if he's innocent or not, he deserves death. You're probably going to be like, wow, really? And then the judge says, okay, you want the death penalty. I find him innocent. Let's just take him out in the street, whip him, and be done with it. I don't know about you, but I'd be like, whoa, hold up now. You just said I'm innocent. Now you want to take me out in the street and have me beat? We know that Jesus was the only one there. The only one that did not deserve death. See, Romans 6:23 tells us the wages of sin is death. And Romans 3:23 tells us that all have sinned. Every one of us, everyone at Jesus' trial, with the exception of Jesus, deserved the death penalty. The only one that was facing the death penalty was the only one that did not deserve it. And yet, none of the rest of them were accused of anything. Jesus is the only person that has ever walked this earth and never sinned. He lived a perfect life, and now he's facing the death penalty. The third part of this trial is the sentencing. Verses 18 through 25 says there, "And they all cried out at once, saying, 'Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, who had been thrown into prison for a certain rebellion made in the city, and for murder.' Pilate, therefore, wishing to release Jesus, again calling to them, but they shouted, saying, 'Crucify him, crucify him.' Then he said to them the third time, 'Why? What evil has he done? I have found no reason for death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go.' But they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and of the chief priests prevailed. So Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they requested, and released to them the one they requested, who for rebellion and murder had been thrown into prison. But he delivered Jesus to their will." It was custom that during the Passover feast, that the Roman officials would pardon a criminal. We see even today, in today's world, that the president, a lot of times it happens right at the end of his term, he goes to doing a lot of pardons. You know, people send in requests to be pardoned, to be acquitted of whatever they've been put in jail for. And it was custom. It was part of their time that during the Passover feast, the Passover festival, that Pilate would release to them one criminal. Now, Jesus was innocent. So why would he even be considered for pardoning? He wasn't guilty of none. He hadn't been sent to prison for none. He wasn't a criminal. But yet, they bring him up for pardoning. Pilate says, let's bring out Barabbas. Now, Barabbas is not just your ordinary thief. He's not just some, guy that's caused a little bit of ruckus in the city. He's not some just troublemaker. No, he's a rebellion, a rebel and a murderer, is what the scripture says there. Pilate gives the people a choice. You got Barabbas over here, a murderer, or you got Jesus over here, an innocent man. Which one do you choose? Now, I don't know about you, but if we had to choose between an innocent man and a murderer, I don't want to go to bed at night thinking that I let out a murderer out of prison, knowing that he's out walking the streets again and that he could knock on my door wanting to murder me or one of my children. I mean, surely the people would want to release the innocent man, and even the accusations that were made against him was just for being a troublemaker, telling the people not to pay their taxes. And I don't know about you, but if we had some guy going around here trying to convince us not to pay our taxes, I mean, that might be a pretty good guy to hang out with. And yet, they choose a murderer over the king of the Jews. The plan backfires on Pilate. See, Pilate's hope, his thought was, let me bring out this murderer. Surely the people are not going to want to release this murderer over this innocent man. I found nothing of fault with Jesus. Barabbas, we know he's a murderer. We know he's a rebellion. But the people cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Barabbas, the murderer, should be the one being sent to be crucified. And yet the people demanded that Jesus, the innocent one, be put on the cross. Pilate, the third time, tells the people, I found no fault in him. And surely the accusations that you brought against him are not worthy of death. The charges that you're charging him with, the penalty's not even close to being death. Pilate knew, though, that if he released Jesus, there would be a riot in the city. There would be violence and an uproar. And he thought, better one dead unjustly than the whole city in violence. What it boiled down to was he knew that if riot broke out in the city, if there was violence in the streets, then he would surely lose his job. Surely the government officials above him would hear about all this and they would have his job. Because it was his responsibility. It was his job to keep peace in the city. So Pilate released Barabbas just like the people had asked, and delivers Jesus to the people for crucifixion. Here we see a verdict of innocence. No fault found in Jesus, with a sentencing of death by crucifixion on the cross. Jesus was innocent. He was perfect. He had no spots or no blemishes, and it had to be that way so that he could be made the ultimate sacrifice for us. In order for Jesus to be the ultimate sacrifice, the atonement for our sins, he had to be perfect, without sin. He took the punishment each and every one of us deserves. Jesus was not crucified because he was guilty. He was crucified because we are. He was crucified in our place to pay our price, to be our pardon, so that we could be pardoned of our sins. Jesus has given every person the ability to be pardoned through his crucifixion. But with a pardon, there are stipulations. See, I did a little research on this pardoning deal. In our world today, a criminal has to fill out an application to be pardoned. They send it to a pardoning committee. This pardoning committee, they review these applications. They then send the applications on that they choose, or, okay, this person's worthy of it, or whatever the cause. Or this person's famous enough that if the president pardons him, it's going to be big news. Whatever the case is, they send it on to the president. He then chooses who he decides to pardon. In the case of a president pardoning somebody, they're all federal crimes that they've committed. If they're against the state, then the governor has the ability to pardon people. But see, these criminals, they can send their application on. But maybe for whatever reason, they decide that, you know what? I am wrong in this situation. I deserve the punishment that I've been dealt. So therefore, I'm not going to accept this pardon. A pardon cannot be forced on somebody. A pardon has to be accepted. Just as a gift has to be accepted. I can go get a gift, and I can wrap this gift up, and I can bring it down here and give it to Dolan. I can set it right in front of him and say, here, Dolan, here's you a gift. And he can say, nah, Chris, I don't deserve that gift, or I don't want that gift, or no, I don't, you keep it, Dolan, he'd say, no, take it back, Chris, and use the money you spent on me to get something for your girls. I can't force Dolan to take that gift. I can't force him to open that gift and accept it. Just as Jesus' salvation is a free gift to each and every one of us, it cannot be forced upon us. We have to open that gift and we have to receive that gift. Amen. Our price, our death penalty. Romans 6:23. The wages of sin is death. The penalty for our sins, that each and every one of us, Romans 3:23, all have sinned. Our verdict is guilty. Our sentencing is death. And it's not physical death, because we're all going to die physically no matter what. Unless Jesus comes back. But we're all sentenced to death, physically. But the death that Jesus is talking about in Romans, the death that Paul's talking about there, is a spiritual death. It's an eternal separation from Jesus and God and hell's damnation. If we do not accept the free gift of salvation from Jesus, then we will spend eternity in hell's damnation. Jesus has died. He's paid the price. It's up to us whether we're going to accept it or not. Just like that pardon. Barabbas could have said, no, I don't want to be released. I want to go on to the cross. And the thing about Barabbas, I seen a thing this week and I never really thought about it. Why did they use Barabbas? Why was Barabbas the one that was brought up to be pardoned? Here you have the worst of the worst. Here you have a murder. You know, too many times we hear people say, well, I'm just too bad of a person. You, Pastor, you don't understand what I've done in the past. I'm not worried about what you did last week or last month or last year. I'm worried about right now. Are you going to accept what Jesus has done for you? Jesus pardoned Barabbas. Barabbas was given a second chance. This morning, Jesus is wanting to give you a second chance. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.